Welcome everyone to today's YouTube interview with Alan Dolan. I'm really happy to be here today because Alan and I have developed something of a professional peer-based relationship over the last couple of years that is still growing, and I look forward to see where it takes us. But I'll tell you a little bit about Alan before we go any further. Alan is the founder of Breath Guru and a breath coach. He's spent 20 years changing people's lives, not least his own, because it all starts with us, right, Alan? And he uses the simple power of breathing to do that. So let me tell you a little bit about his background, because like many of us in this field, it wasn't always this. So after graduating from Aston University in the UK, Alan worked overseas in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East, forging a career in the high-pressure world of communications. His last position in his previous incarnation was as a PR manager in the aerospace industry. After taking a sabbatical in order to pursue his interest in all things metaphysical and gaining a certification in yoga instruction, transpersonal hypnotherapy, and counseling, Alan was introduced to the wonders of breathwork and immediately knew that this would form the foundation of the next stage of his journey. So, Alan has studied with some of the primary teachers in the world of breathwork and has hybridized their teachings to create his own unique style of conscious connected breathing. In a series of happy coincidences, he found himself in Lanzarote, at which point he realized that he finally felt at home. Alan now runs Breath Guru retreats, and this is also the place, by the way, in Lanzarote where breathguru.com was born, his key message being that you are the guru and your breath is the key. So Alan has continued to go on to develop his work, which I know we're going to dive into today. It's a great pleasure to have you, Alan. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Steph. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And we've been planning this for a while, haven't we? So it's great to actually finally chunk out some time and sit down and have a chat.
Yeah, I like to think of these as like almost like cup of tea chats, you know?
Totally,
They're
completely.
grounded, they're
Yeah.
down to earth, and
Yeah, I've got no idea what's the plan is there is no plan. We've got a rough thing. I think we said metaphysics, didn't we? Kind of like
yeah.
the mysterious aspect.
Yeah, and I mean, in a way, we could start there because you know, and I know because we've had this kind of contact that started to grow and we have conversations. Those originate, by the way, just to contextualize this for those who are watching, from Alan and I having a shared love of both grounded, responsible practice, but also being really open to the metaphysics, to the kind of the unknown. And after spending a weekend away with my friend this weekend just gone, where I was talking about my kind of investment at the moment recently, which you know about, in more the scientific aspects of breathing and the respiratory health aspects of breathing. I said to her, you know, my primary fundamental nature is, you know, I'm a shaman, I'm a medicine woman, I'm a kind of somebody who makes that bridge between what we know, feel, touch, taste, see, and what we don't really know, the consciousness. And I know that you're also passionate about that. So maybe we just start there with like,
Sure.
what does it mean
Yeah.
to you? Like,
Well,
why are you so
you know,
interested in it?
yeah, I mean, the first experience I ever had was on a yoga teacher training. I was an absolute I was addicted to yoga. It turned things around for me. I was in love with it. I did it every day, no question. I would never miss my practice. Weekends, 3 times a practice in a weekend, and I was just completely besotted. So I thought, okay, let's go. I was doing my life change. That was quite sort of fairly unusual at that point. It's 20 years ago. Nowadays it's like an everyman story. I left my corporate career but that was actually fairly different. People thought I'd gone nuts. I was
Mm.
working in BA systems, and they actually thought I'd lost it. There was a rumor going around that I was leaving to do a master's degree in aromatherapy, which I thought was amazing. But I got to do this fantastic yoga teacher training at a place called Masara. And it was the guy who was the director of training at Kripalu, a guy called Don Stapleton, amazing teacher, and his wife, Amber Stapleton. And their faculty was just flawless. So I was in heaven. You're on this amazing, beautiful Costa Rican beach. There's 53 other people who are equally in love with yoga, and you're doing it for a month with some of the best teachers around. Bliss. And then we had a day off, and two of the guys that were from the States said, "I've got this thing. It's called conscious connected breathing." And I, to be honest, I remember being quite sniffy about it. I was like, well, I'm a yogi, baby. What have you got to teach me about breathing? You know, I do all my pranayama. How wrong was I? You know, 45 minutes later, the world was quite literally a different place. I'd seen a dimension. I'd been exposed to a dimension, had a visceral experience of a dimension that I'd never experienced before, that I simply didn't know existed. And it blew my doors off. I'm a very curious person. My nature is like, why? You know, I want to find out stuff. So when this thing came up, I had no reference point for it. It just blew my paradigm apart. And I was just hooked from that point, because I realized that it was something that I'd never accessed before, but it was something internal, but somehow the breath had shifted me into a space where I could access it freely and fully. And I got a lot of information in that 45 minutes. You know, it wasn't just sort of a lot of energy moving through me. It was like, I got information, you know. I call it my inner teacher, or my inner professor was like, "You've been depressed since you were 12. And I hadn't known that, you know. I'd experienced it, but I didn't know that's what it was. So it was like this missing piece of the jigsaw puzzle sort of fell into place. And I knew it was truth. And I knew it was truth in a very bodily, almost like a cellular reality, not a cognitive knowing. And that was different as well. I hadn't really experienced that level of truth before. And then it told me, you know, you can shift this, but you just have to practice every day. It basically said you need to get your shit together and look after yourself better, because you're not doing. And I did. I practiced every day, and I cried a lot during that period. There were a lot of tears. There was a lot of grief coming up. And 12 weeks later, it was done, and I knew it was done. And I was the 2.0 version of me. It was like me without a lot of my baggage, and the depression didn't really rear its head again. And if it, you know, if I know what to do now, I don't ever say I cured it. But I think I have a propensity to go there if I do the wrong things. So now I know what those things are. I don't do them, frankly. So I just head in the other direction and do a John Wayne and head it off at the pass. But what amazed me was that this power was somehow switched on by my breath, but was something that was very intrinsically me. And I hadn't had that experience before. And it just completely, I was besotted. You know, and I knew at that point I was looking for something, and my plan B, my insurance policy plan, was to open a yoga retreat, which at that time there weren't that many of those, and I knew that this was it. So I just went out. I remember saying, before I left Saudi Arabia, which is where I've been working in the aerospace industry, I remember saying to the universe, like, make it obvious, don't make it ambiguous, make it really bloody obvious, so that I know where I should be heading. Right. And it did. It really did. It couldn't have been, I call it the lightning bolt. You know, it's just this lightning bolt. And I've talked to other people who had that experience since, you know, and I always feel like it's a great sign. If it really zaps you first time, pay attention, because it's calling you, you know. And I realized I'd found my vocation. And it was very clear to me. There was zero ambiguity. I knew that this was what I was going to do. I couldn't believe that people didn't know about it. I couldn't believe that I'd never heard of it. You know, I'd consider myself to be somebody who was an explorer. I'd been off in India and Kathmandu and all sorts of places, never come across breathwork. And I was like, whoa, you know, this is the most powerful thing I've ever experienced. Why doesn't everybody know about this? And I'm sure a lot of people watching this, you know, have had that experience. Like, how come I didn't know about this? You know, and I think it's because people have zero expectations of breath. They got very low expectation. You know, breathing, yeah, sure. And then you experience it and you're like, whoa. So I was hooked, and I knew two things. I knew that I was going to share it with as many people as possible. And I knew that my previous experience was going to be really helpful in that. I was a PR and comms manager, so I knew how to work with media. And I knew I was going to build a retreat based on it. And that retreat would be a center for healing, and it would be like the optimum environment. I was very intrigued by how we could sort of make a model of like, what's the optimum conditions in which to experience this. You know, I'd experienced it in the middle of a jungle in Costa Rica, which was pretty cool. But I'd thought more about like, how can we support the people who are experiencing it? And funnily enough, I've just been talking to, I've got retreats on at the moment, and a retreat client is leaving this afternoon, and he's just sat down with me and he said, he's a commercially minded man, you know, and he's just said, don't change a thing. The formula's perfect, you know, and it was just so nice to hear that. People often say how much they've enjoyed it, but he just said your system works brilliantly. And that's really what I was going for. It's from when they step off the plane to when they get back on the plane, everything's been preempted, it's been done for them. So people don't have to worry about anything other than dropping into that process, which they do. And as you know, we've had conversations about Lanzarote. I call it the magic island. You know, it's there's a lot of people talk about dragon energies here. I think of it as Atlantean. It's powerful. It's a really powerful place. My house overlooks volcanoes in the ocean. There's 352 volcanoes on the island, so there's a lot of fire energy, you know, but equally it's surrounded by water, so there's a lot of balance here. So yeah, I was just hooked from day one, Steph, and the metaphysical aspect for me has been the foundation of everything I've ever done. And I don't sort of stand on soapboxes, you know, I don't feel the need to sermon or whatever, you know, or preach. The breath is very intelligent, and spirit is the ultimate intelligence. So it's going to tell you what you need to know when you're good and ready. That's not my job. My job is to create the conditions by which people can experience that. And that's really how I see my role, more as a guide, kind of like I've got the map and I'm going, it's that way. And you end up in the space whereby you can experience it. And you know, all the best teachers I've had some, been so lucky to have had these incredible teachers along the way, both breath and not. And they've all been people who've really lifted me up and allowed me to explore it and experience it myself, rather than trying to rescue. And that's very much one of my key values. You know, we are all divine beings. You may not know that. It doesn't matter if you know you don't. You're a divine being, and I'm going to respect you and treat you as such. And you may be in, you know, all sorts of drama going on in your life or crossroads or whatever it is, and that's fine, because that's your path. And I'm just going to respect your path and honor that and support you in whatever way I can, without attempting to rescue you, because ultimately that would be disempowering. And I want to do the opposite. And I feel like breath is like the ultimate empowering tool that's available to us. You don't get more empowering than, you know, than breathing. And I love the fact, you know, I live in Spain, so the verb in Spanish to breathe, inspirar, inspiration and spirit. So it's very much, I feel like it's our interface with spirit. And yeah, it's just been the context in which everything else happens. So, and then Breath Guru, you know, developed as a result of that. And my ego is like, they'll think you want disciples. And anybody who knows me is that it just laughs at that, because it's so flat. I mean, that's one of the things that's really beautiful about it. You really get that there is no hierarchy. There's people at different stages of the journey, but it's flat. And when I meet somebody, whatever their circumstances, you know, I'm meeting an equal, you know, irrespective of what cognitive knowledge they've got or what they've done or how many retreats they've been on. It's irrelevant. I'm just meeting another divine being in whatever guise they're in. And I love that, because that keeps me open to learning. And I learn, you know, from every single person I work with, as I'm sure you do, you know. But the mystery remains, like, what is it? Like, what is this thing and what's happening?
Let me interject a moment, Alan, and
Sure.
go back before I lose this question, because
Sure.
thank you for such a beautiful explanation of how you see the work and how it came into your experience of your world and changed it quite radically. There were so many questions. The first thing, I love that you framed it as talking about this cellular knowing rather than a cognitive kind of awareness. But you talked about the optimum conditions that you want to create for people. So here's the question, you know, because often people come into breathwork experiences or retreat experiences, and they may have those optimum conditions to feel something, to experience something that's out of reach on a normal day-to-day basis. But how do we then support people in maintaining those optimum conditions, or actually just recognizing the value so that they don't come and have a peak experience and go away and then go, I don't know what to do now because I'm just back in my life doing all the same things?
So I spent the first 10 years of my breath career with exactly that question.
Right.
And it was the big one. because people were having these amazing experiences, and then they were kind of tanking, basically. As soon as they got to resistance, they were tanking. So I knew I had to do something about that if we were going to sustain it and really empower people on the medium long term. And there were two things, really. One was reframing resistance as something that's super positive. It goes with the territory. I think of it as like Alice in Wonderland, Tweedledum, Tweedledee. Expansion and resistance go together. They may sound as though they're opposing forces, but actually they're going to come together. You are never going to get expansion without some form of toys flying out of the clock from the ego. You know, it's just how it works. It's the mechanism.
You
so
have
I
no
see
idea
that as,
how timely this is. I'll tell you afterwards.
Okay, because that saved me. That was just such a gem when it dropped out. I was like, okay, great. Because I'd been previously perceiving that as failure, which is my stuff, you know, but like, oh, I'm somehow weak or I can't do it or whatever. And I'd use it as another rod to beat myself up with.
Right.
And when I reframed it, it just changed everything. And so that was the first step. And then the second thing was, okay, so how do you maintain this? And we can talk about, you know, have a private space where you're not going to be interrupted, you know, have the right lighting, make sure you're warm enough, have box tissues, have some water. But actually, how are you going to really do it? And what I found to be the most useful was people wanted moral support, and I couldn't be with them all the time. You know, they could come and have a retreat, or I could see them in London or wherever, but I couldn't like go home with them. You know, and a lot of people said, I just like to take you home, bring you out, you know, and I thought, well, okay, that's an app. So I made the app, and it's really proven its worth. And I really noticed the difference between people who are using it and people who aren't. It's absolutely black and white. Yeah, if they're using it, they're going to fly. And if they're not, they tend to be a bit erratic and tank, generally, you know. So why wouldn't you use it? It's free. You know, you've got somebody talking you through, keeping you present, and just, you know, just guiding you a little bit, not getting in your face with it, but just being there in the background as moral support. So that was kind of how we dealt with that. And you know, it's free. It was I wanted to give something back. I felt so grateful for what I've discovered with it and what it's given me. You know, it literally changed my life radically, that I felt I really wanted to contribute. And the app is part of that contribution. And, you know, it doesn't generate income. And clearly, you know, it's a business here. I've got to make money to survive and spread the word. But I have to say it's one of my favorite parts of the business. And when I look at the printout and I see where it's been downloaded, I just see the globe with all these lights flicking on around the globe. And it's like Ulaanbaatar, we've got a download there, you know, or, you know, Santiago de Chile or Adelaide or Toronto or whatever. So we got like, I think we had last time I looked, we had about 26,000 downloads. So that's lovely. You know, I'm aiming for 100,000. That's my next target for that. And we have, you know, plans afoot to make that happen. We're rejigging the app at the moment. So I think that's really, it's the moral support aspect, and it's framing resistance in the right way. So you know that it's part of the learning experience. It's nothing unusual. It's no detriment to your character. It's nothing about failure. It's just the ego panicking, because I was thinking it's like you've got a level of emotional content generally that's coming up that the ego does not want to go there. It's fear-based and it's risk averse, bless it. Yeah. And, you know, it just doesn't want to engage with it. It wants continuity and sameness. And of course, we want innovation so we can change stuff and we can, you know, expand and learn and grow. So it's, you know, it's sort of opposed really to our better interests, although it thinks it's protecting us. So I do think it gets a bad rap, and I don't give my ego a hard time. And you know, I treat it like I would treat my little brother. You know, he's 8, he's cute, and he's very bright with data, and he can do lots of interesting stuff. And I give him lots of hugs and I ruffle his hair, but he's not driving my car, because that would be irresponsible of me to put him in the driving seat of that car, because he's not capable of driving it. He doesn't have the experiential vision. So that's kind of how I feel about it. Like, my guidance system is not the ego, really, even though it wants to be and battles furiously sometimes with it. But it's more an emotional, intuitive guidance. And I think that's one of the things, you know, you talk about the embodiment aspect. It's one of the things of coming into the body, and that's first base for us as breath workers, I think, or certainly for the way I teach it, It's to actually be in the vehicle. And once you're in the vehicle, right, now you can really, now you can really do something. But if you're half in and half out, which is most people on the planet, then that's challenging, because then your energy is super up top, which of course is where most people are. So, so I feel like when we really drop in, we're in the vehicle, then we have access to this more intuitive, more kind of emotional, you could say right brain way of moving forwards, which isn't to say we don't need the left data analytical, of course we do, but it shouldn't be running the show. It's like the CEO got demoted to a department head. Yeah.
Which is not going to like, as you said.
Well, it doesn't like it at all, that's the point. So as I say, I've had some battles with that. I made a decision about a month ago. I made a decision, and this one really tickled me, because you'd think, people assume like, oh, you've been doing it for 20 years, you're kind of blah, blah, blah. No, it's the same. So I made this decision. Basically somebody had written me off for £1,000. I looked at it, I thought about it, I thought my piece is worth more than £1,000.
Yeah.
I'm letting it go.
Yeah.
And my ego was not having any of it. And I'd made the decision, but my ego was not having it. So for 3 days, I had this little, like a Jiminy Cricket figure, and every time I sort of relaxed, and still, oh, what about, and all sorts of stuff, against me and the person in question. Like we can, and at the end, I was quite impressed. Really, I was impressed at its persistence.
Yeah,
because I wasn't going to change my decision, and it still was hammering for 3 days.
It's so interesting. It really is. It's like, I love all these things you're pointing to. And the reason I said, oh, it couldn't be more timely, is because I'm working through the presence process again at the moment with 2 accountability buddies. And it's so good to have these accountability buddies. And I am feeling my resistance. For 2 days, it was great. It was like, peace and quiet. I've got 15 minutes to breathe and and then all of a sudden it was like, and there's a couple of things that I want to talk about here. One is that I do feel that human beings' attention spans have been hijacked enormously by very rapid exposure to ideas and values and principles through things like Instagram and TikTok and all the stuff that is massive out there now. But the other thing is, I've been struggling with that resistance. So I was away at the weekend and I thought, right, I'll keep up my practices. I'm in this accountability group. I'm going to do them. And but I was also away, as you know, because we mentioned it before the call, in a very busy place, like back to back, people everywhere. Great. It was exciting. There was culture, there was art, there was resistance, there was music, there was all sorts, but there was a lot of people. And I'm in Somerset, in Glastonbury, in the middle of a relatively small town. And all of a sudden last night I thought, okay, so let me just have a practice before sleep where I'll just lie on the bed and bring in awareness. It took me absolutely I was shocked by how little I was feeling in my body. I was lying on the bed and I thought, just keep it simple, like literally, what's your arm aware of? What's your leg aware of? What are you feeling on your hand? And it took me ages, Alan, to drop in and just feel from the body. So those combinations of things about how disembodied we are in general, and I'm somebody who prides myself on working at that, and the kind of rapid exposure to ideas. How do you see that impacting people's self-awareness, ability to maintain their practices, and the quality of presence?
Well, I think the beautiful thing about breathwork and sort of a nice side effect, we don't go in saying, I love the fact it's non-directed. So we never go in saying, we're going to do A, B, C, D, E. It's not like that. We trust and we surrender, really. But one of the lovely side effects that happens with everybody, if they do the practice consistently, underline, highlight, is powers of concentration, powers of ability to focus, because you're focused on one point. But the way I teach it is I use what I call the anchor point, which is essentially second chakra. And I just get people to focus on that as the beginners. That's all they do. They don't move it. They don't work with focus at all. They just stay there the whole time. And of course, the mind dives around as it's wont to do, and that's fine. But they keep bringing it back. And I use the analogy of training a puppy. You know, you tell the puppy what it wants to do and it won't do it, but you keep being consistent and eventually it gets the message and it does it, you know. And it's that sort of thing, that kind of playful, not in any kind of sense of, you know, a yang. It's just very gentle. Just show it, be compassionate, be, you know, be soft with it.
Mm.
So I love that people are coming back and going, whoa, you know, my mental acuity is amazing. I can really sit now. My mind doesn't bounce around all over the place. So that's wonderful. But of course, our culture elicits the opposite. So, you know, I was in the gym the other week and it was one I hadn't been to, and I walked in and there was just TVs on the wall. So everybody's on their bikes with the headsets in, watching TV. And I was like, wow, how disembodied can you get? You know,
yeah.
When you think of what that's about, it's about connecting with your body. You're not connecting with anything at that point other than here, you know. So it's interesting how our culture is constantly, even if you look at it at the really macro level, you want to feel better, fix the externals. It's nothing to do with the internal. Now that's, as we know, completely the reverse. It's true. You know, you want to change the world, change yourself, go inside. Change happens internally, and then the Rubik's cube of the universe will, you know, will shift stuff accordingly. So I call that deck chairs on the Titanic thinking, meaning, you know, plate spin, get all the externals looking okay, and then you'll be fine, and your internal state will change. It probably won't. You'll probably just default back, because nothing's shifted internally. So we know that everything's energy, right? And that's where it starts. And that's what's so amazing about breath, is that it's the bridge. It connects every single part of who and what we are, the seen and the unseen, down to the most fundamental aspects, like the atomic aspect, you know, subatomic. So you want fundamental change. That's where you're going to go, you know, not the externals, not the deck chairs on the Titanic when you've got a bloody big hole in your hull. Fix the hull. Now watch the deck chairs arrange themselves. And the other analogy I've been using a lot, I was thinking about Winnie the Pooh, and, you know, poo sticks. So I was thinking about kind of being on a rubber ring and being on the river and just kind of lying back on my rubber ring and going, oh, look at that, what's coming in, and look at this. In other words, the flow is already there. You know, we don't have to dig that channel. We don't have to create that current. It already exists. And all we need to do is be here, be present, be connected, be resourced, and just lie back and see what's coming, which isn't to say don't have intentions. Certainly, by all means, put those out, but allow it to be easier. You know, that kind of grafting thing, you know, has to be, you know, my beliefs around that were very, you know, I'm a northern working class lad, you know, it's like work hard, get up to the next level. It was Irish Roman Catholic, you know, immigrant sort of thinking. And it was very much like, it doesn't matter if you like your job or not, just do it. And just get to the next level, you know. And it was just the end. So when I left and started to do it differently, our family were all just like, what is he on? What is he doing? Where's his mortgage? You know. So I went to Africa, you know, and they were just like, does not compute. And now they get it. And they see that I've done it differently. And it's lovely that we've got this sort of mutual respect of, I totally respect the way they've done it, but it wasn't for me. Yeah. I had a moment of enlightenment on the M63 on a Monday morning, and I was at the traffic lights, and I was in my car, I was in my, whatever, you know, Ford Escort with my copier in the back, and I was on a management training program, translates to flogging copiers, you know, after graduating university with a business degree. And I looked at everybody, and I could see the city was dark. You know, the city was dark in front of me. It was grey, it was rainy. There's just tons of traffic. And I looked at everybody and I just thought, no, this is not me for the next 40 years. I'm not prepared to live it like this. It's just not, it's not tangible. It's not feasible for me. Went in, dropped my keys, and decided to do it differently. So that was a bit off-piste. But
but it's all really, really important.
But it's that thing about being sort of almost encouraged to look anywhere but inside. Yeah, that's the point that I find really ironic. And once you begin to look inside, well, you know, then watch the changes happen. And relatively easily, a lot of the time, once you know how to create, then it's really not so difficult, and when we sort of let go of that, I call it the illusion of control, and when we just relax and let everything flow, watch what happens. We're holding on so tightly.
Which is not being passive. I really want to bring that into anybody
Not
who's
at all.
watching. Letting go and being in the flow is not like, I'm just going to wait for everything to come to me.
No,
It still requires our active
totally. Yeah,
participation. And
yeah,
our decisions and our choices, and that's even more important, the way the
yeah,
world's moving at the moment, because it's
yeah.
moving so fast.
Totally. I would add to that our self-care and our self-resourcing.
Yeah.
Just it's not passive at all. But it's very. The paradox for me is the more I let go, the more powerful I become.
Yeah.
And by powerful, I mean in my truth, the
Yes.
truth of who I am, the truth of how I can express myself.
Yes.
Whereas when I was holding super tightly, how can energy flow in that? It can't. It's like a pipe, just is really. So when you let go, of course, there's more room. There's spaciousness.
So many people think that power comes from status, and it comes from wealth, and it comes from materialism. And I've just been listening to, right, I'm going to bring this in. I wasn't going to, but actually it feels really relevant right now. I've just been listening to a podcast, Stephen Bartlett and Mo Gawdat, and I just bought Mo Gawdat's book, and he wrote a book called Scary Smart, which is all about the rise of artificial intelligence. And but he's also written books on mindset and happiness and everything else. Again, very, very, very successful. He was one of the founders of Google X and developed AI for them, and he's stepped away from it all. But the thing that really struck me with it, because he's had personal tragedy to deal with within that, was he now lives where I was so shocked. Like, he had 2 Rolls Royces, he had businesses, he had everything that you'd think would be that material thing. Then personal tragedy hit him with his son's death at 21. Really, really, really sad story from an accident, an operation, a basic operation, an appendectomy that went wrong and was blundered, right? So can you imagine living with that as a father or parent?
Sure.
But now he said he doesn't have a house, he doesn't have a mortgage, he doesn't have a car. He got rid of so much stuff. He goes by Uber. If he buys something, he lets something else go. Everything he owns, he can put in one suitcase. Not because he's running away from anything, but because he's suddenly gone, all of those values that I was looking for externally, actually they're in here. I want to do good in the world. And as somebody who's developed AI and stepped away from it, he said to me, well, he didn't say it to me, but this is what spoke to me, was, well, when Stephen Bartlett said, oh, this sounds really gloomy, because it's a scary thing, what's happening in the world. He said, yes, but he said, what would you leave our listeners with? So number 1, you are here now in this moment. Number 2, you are here now in this moment, and you have the power to change. It's not the machines we need to be afraid of, it's the humans. Because if we don't get the boat fixed, the leak fixed, then we are just rearranging those deck chairs. If we don't come into embodiment through these practices, but remain open to the vast power of the unknown, and that's where I'm bringing this in now as a segue for where we want to go to as well, Alan. But is there anything you want to add to what I've just said before we move to that?
To me, there's nothing is bad or good.
Yeah.
It's neutral, right? Yeah. It's neutral. It's how, as you say, it's the human factor. But TV. When I was a kid, TV was used for education. They used to wheel in the TV and pop it in the room. We'd have whatever it was. So it's not good or bad. Media gets a really bad rap these days, and rightly so in a lot of cases. Having said that, and AI is the next thing, and everybody's really like, whoa, it's not that. It's us. We are the deciding factor in it. It's, people talk a farmer or the legal, whatever. It's people. Pharma as an entity in itself is neither good nor bad. It's how it's being used and what the setup is and the conflicts that are inherent within it. That's why it's not working as we think it should, or most sort of thinking people would think it should. So just that really, the people factor. And of course, that's what we're talking about, changing internally so we can change the externals.
And this is why you and I and many like us do what we do, right? One, for me, I see myself as being in service. When people say, why do you do what you do? I say, because healthy, happy people create a healthy, happy world. And yeah, you could go, oh, that's all a bit lovely, isn't it? That's saccharine sweet. It's like, no, 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 no. I've seen the other side of life, as you know, and I know you have too. And
Yeah,
I've seen suffering and I've seen pain and I've known it myself.
yeah.
But I want to talk about now because we wanted to move towards that why breath has the capacity to take us to those places that, I've just completed my OA training, which was incredible. One of the biggest takeaways that I got from that was actually about Patrick McKeown's generosity in
Mhm.
sharing his materials, his
It's
desire to do good in the world, and at the same time, what I was aware of was, well, I'm not there as somebody who's going to only work with performance and recovery and athletes and all the rest of it. I'm a kind of medicine woman, shaman, elder,
Mhm.
and what I'm more interested in is how people can find that capacity to radically change their lives, to live in ways that are so enriching and fulfilling, right? And I know you are too. And so for me, it's kind of like it's the mystery. And this is the bit where the science needs to meet the mystery
Yeah, and is doing.
and is doing, yeah.
Yeah,
And
which is really
connected breath.
exciting. Yeah,
Yes, connected breath is the piece that for me is like I could do 15 years of functional breathing. And you said this right at the beginning when you said, man, what can you teach me about the breath? I'm a yogi. I
yeah,
could
yeah.
do 15 years of functional breathing and never reach some of the places that I've reached in breathwork
Exactly,
sessions. And
exactly.
does that mean that there is malpractice and bad out there? You said there's no good or bad. It's this
Mm.
sense of, yeah, there's people in the driver's seat with their own values,
Yeah,
with their
there's
own vision or lack of it.
sure, there's ignorance for sure, and I think that that's one of the things that is huge on the spiritual path. People thinking they're more advanced than they actually are. That's a very dangerous place to go to when you think you've got the truth. you know, and I've come across it a lot. And, definitely, do I have an ego? Of course I've got an ego. It's not going anywhere, but I'm aware enough to see it, I think, what it is. Usually, sometimes it comes in under the radar. But yeah, so I think, is there malpractice? Yeah, of course there is. We're currently hoping to do something about that, in terms of standards, etc. But in terms of, why this thing rather than, I loved pranayama. I was totally besotted by yoga. It really, really did some amazing things for me. But what extra thing did this have? And it was this ability to go beyond what was known. And that really piqued my curiosity because I like the unknown. I like the occult and what's hidden. And I'm very much about discovering that, like, the hidden bits. Let's look under here. Let's have a look at that.
Yeah.
And, and I checked out a lot of stuff by the time I got to breath. And I couldn't believe that something that was so simple as just simply connecting a breath could have such profound effects. It brought on you could say, my inner healer. I healed myself of a 25-year depression in 12 weeks. That's impossible, but I did it. So I know empirically it's possible. So therefore I shared that, irrespective of what the data is saying. In fact, there wasn't any. So that was an interesting thing, to be so cutting edge that there really isn't, much data around. Like, of course, the pranayama, there's tons. If you look in any of the, university studies, medical institution studies, there's a lot on pranayama. There's tons. So I was looking at that, at the beginning, and I was noticing there's this dearth of data around conscious connected breath. Why? Because it's newer.
Yeah.
Pranayama's been around for at least 10,000 years. Some people estimate up to 25,000. For me, breath is an ancient thing. We've rediscovered it. It's not new. There's nothing new under the sun. The 60s, for all those reasons we know about, legal and illegal, created this shift, and breath came out of that place. Conscious connected breath came out with Leonard Orr and Stan Grof.
Yeah.
So it's really relatively new. It's only 50 years, and compared to the possibly 25,000 years of pranayama, it's a baby. So therefore, there's not that much data, but happily that's changing, and I find that really exciting. That the stuff that we know empirically from our own experience, now has data to back it up. And we've talked about one specific thing just recently, because I very excitedly wrote to you one day. I was like, my God, have you seen this? You know, and it was just, it was great to see it there in black and white. And I'm going to just refer to it quickly. It was one of my,
Well, before you go there,
oh, go on.
before you go there, what I want to
Go.
say to anybody watching now, this is a bridge point for both of us, because lots of people, let's bust a myth first. Lots of people,
Yeah.
when they talk about connected breathwork who haven't been trained in some of the science of the physiology and the what's happening in the body, will say, oh, we're rapidly oxygenating the body. But actually the opposite is true, because most of us walk around at 95 to 99% oxygen saturation. So you can't really get more oxygen saturated than that. So what we're doing when we're consciously connecting our breathing and intentionally hyperventilating, but with it's not hyperventilation because there's conscious awareness, is we are actually reducing the oxygen that gets across the blood-brain barrier and to the vital organs. So now bring in this thing that you want to talk about.
So that's a big myth, right? Everybody assumes flood your body with oxygen, you know,
Yeah.
It's nothing to do with that. It's to do with flow. I always remember my first teacher, Judy Kravitz, transformational breath, flow. Her mantra was flow over volume. Flow, and it's just stuck with me. It's with me forever. That it'll never go. It's nothing to do with volume. Yeah, my sister's got a teeny tiny bird breath. She has amazing sessions. Nothing to do with volume. Yes, we want to learn how to receive, and the inhale is our vehicle for doing that. And a lot of us aren't very good at receiving, so it's important in that sense. But it's nothing to do with the volume. Yeah. So then I teach people, as we both do. We teach our trainees who become graduates to go out and spread the word even further. And one of my trainees who became a graduate is now doing his PhD in breathwork. And he's called his handle is Breath Geek. So if you're on Instagram, have a look at him. He's called Richard. Yeah, he's amazing, an amazing guy and very bright guy and very, very into like the data aspect. And of course, we need people like that. You know, we need the people who are really going to look into them, bring us up some hard data. So he flipped me something the other week. He's in San Francisco doing his PhD, and he just flipped me a thing. So I thought you might be interested in this. Hell yeah, amazing. Transient hypofrontality.
Yeah.
So when I talk to people about the mental emotional aspects of breathwork, which is really one of my sort of passions, is mental health, given where I came from. So I always say, well, there's something that happens. This is how spurious it was. There's something that happens when you connect your breath, that the doors to the subconscious seem to open, and we're able to access this mental emotional material that's normally inaccessible. So I've been saying that for years, and I know that to be true, as you do. You know, we see this empirically all the time.
Stan Groff was the leader with that. Yeah,
exactly. So here we go. Now we've got a study, and actually it was 2007, and it was study was done by Ryan, Wine, and Williams, and it was published in the Journal of Complementary Medicine. Title was Holotropic Breathwork: The Potential Role of a Prolonged Voluntary Hyperventilation Procedure as an Adjunct to Psychotherapy. And what they discovered was that because there was less oxygen going into the prefrontal cortex, some gatekeeper aspect to the prefrontal cortex relaxed and released, and therefore this emotional mental content was able to be accessed. And when I read it, I was like, whoa, I've got to tell Steph, and you'd already know that, you know. And it was just like, oh my God, that's great, you know. And actually,
but you know how I knew? I mean, honestly, Alan, the context for me was like I'd said something about so many people come into breathwork because they have experiences that you may describe, if they've been in medicine circles, and when I say medicine, I mean psychedelics, as being on a par with, you know, ingesting psychedelic substances and getting into an altered state and different awarenesses, like people do with mushrooms. And again, like Stan Groff was doing with all his experiments with LSD, which then stopped when that stopped and turned to the breath. And this woman just answered, who was a psychologist, who said, yeah, it's the default mode networks, they're switching off. And I was like, never heard of those. What's that?
Yeah.
And so this transient, meaning temporary,
yes,
hypofrontality is something that you and I are both, I mean, you've opened another doorway for me now, being the way that I am, and I'm sure you are too. But it's like, well, even from today, it was like, oh, hang on a minute. So there are a group of people who typically have frontality, not transient, but hypofrontality generally, and they are people with ADHD, bipolar, schizophrenia. And I was like, oh, well, that's really interesting because these are some of the contraindications for connected breath work.
Yes.
So again, like I discovered when I was looking at cardiovascular impact, it's like
Yeah.
those contraindications are there for a reason. That's why
Yes.
I'm such a stickler about
Yeah.
good training and informed breath work, not just people going, well, it's just the breath, anybody can do it. I don't need to go and get trained. I don't need to get insurance. It's like, well, good luck to you.
Yeah.
And you're acting recklessly, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah. For
But
sure.
this piece, as you say, when we reduce the oxygen supply across the blood-brain barrier temporarily, and I get why, people like Patrick McEwen have big question marks because they are saying quite rightly, I believe, we don't know what the long-term impact of reducing oxygen supply across the blood-brain barrier is because we haven't done that. Like you said, these studies, a
Mhm.
lot of them are new. And but we're here, we're in this life, in this moment, we're kind of living vehicles, we're living guinea pigs, really, aren't we, for exploring consciousness. And
Mm.
wouldn't it be awful if we just went, oh, I better not try that because I don't know what the long-term effects will be, because we don't know what the long-term effects of
No.
anything is,
No.
whether it's the food chain and processed food and 5G, and we don't know.
Totally. Yeah. I couldn't agree more, Steph. And then you look, and the way we teach, I think, is quite yin compared to some of the methodology that's out there. I love Wim Hof, amazing man. He's done so much for breathwork generally. I saw a documentary of his just a while back. There's one on Vice, and I was looking at just how yang it all was. And everybody had tetany, and they were all just like, oh. And I was like, whoa, I just had a guy in a retreat. It's one of my graduates. He just left today. And he went and did that 1 week training, and he was like, it was amazing. But
Yeah.
it was more about mental strength.
Yes.
For
Yeah.
him, he came back. That was his takeaway from it. It was blowing away your beliefs about what you thought you were capable of. It
Absolutely.
wasn't so much about anything to do with the metaphysical aspects or even the mental emotional aspects. It was specifically cognitive. He got rid of some really unhelpful beliefs he had in a week, and that's amazing. But I think, the way we're doing it, I think, is very safe. I think we're both very aware that safety is our first base. And yeah, we want to be experimental for sure within what seems to us to be reasonable limits. And we are guinea pigs in a sense. We're sort of psychonauts in a sense, or breathonauts, if there is such a word. But you know what I mean? We're going into the unknown, and that's what I find fascinating, that we're actually pushing the envelope. That's exactly where I want to be. And that was why it really appealed when I found this. And it's just like, what? This is possible? Oh, okay, I'm on it. I'm sold. Took 45 minutes, sold. I'm probably 20 years in, more engaged with it than ever, because I realized really how we really are at the very beginning of this. We're nowhere near. I mean, there's just it is mysterious. The innate nature of what we're exploring is absolutely mysterious. And I love that. I love being in that mystery and not knowing, and letting it take its time and let it reveal itself, as opposed to like, I must, faster, more. Yeah, we love the data coming in, but also there's a sense of like it just revealing itself to us, as we know from our individual journeys and from the journeys we see with everybody that we work with. It's completely bespoke. Everybody gets it revealed to them in a unique way, according to their own particular needs, wants, and desires.
Yeah. And it
That in
comes from that
itself.
receiving place that you talked about a
Yeah.
moment ago. Because if you look at indigenous cultures where the relationship with the great mystery, as it's actually called, is so powerful and so strong and so revered and respected, it's like, no, there's an awful lot that we don't know of the brain mind, but that we might be able to drop into those quiet places and sense and feel and become creative from that place,
Yeah.
creation coming
So
from that still point.
it's actually both and. isn't it? So we're pro data, totally. I'm so psyched that Rich is doing his PhD. He's going to be producing very interesting data around depression and anxiety and the effect of conscious connected breathwork. That's amazing. And at the same time, there's still going to be this level of sort of the mysterious nature of it all, because it's consciousness, you know, we're working with consciousness or spirit, or call it whatever you want, you know, which is pretty much, I mean, its very nature is amorphous. It's not tangible, you know. So I'm really liking that interplay at the moment, that like on the one hand, we are sort of exploring it and we're cutting edge, and then the other, it's in the context of just this great big mystery, which is beautiful, you know. And the bottom line is really, it works. It works really, really well. As a species, we've never needed to be more connected to ourselves, to our nature, our true nature. You know, we are in the Kali Yuga, as we've discussed before, and there is balance. You know, there's a lot of light on the planet. It's always in balance, the light and the dark. So my prayer, if you like, is to just connect as many people as possible with their own power, and let them discover their own unique journey. You know, there is no one journey, there's innumerable journeys, you know, and that's totally mind-blowing and awesome in the original sense of the word, that the intelligence works that out. You know, when you think about just your journey and how that's all come together, and, you know, the tapestry, and then you see that happening times like 8 billion, and then you think about all the other beings in all the other universes. I mean, that's like a boom, you know, mind blown, you know. So the intelligence that organizes all of that, truly awesome, truly mysterious.
So, I mean, I'm aware, like, I could chat with you all day about all of this stuff, and
Weeks.
yeah.
It could be weeks. Let's just bring a tent next time. Sleeping bags.
I'll come to Lanzarote. I was so drawn by that, you know, because in my birth chart many, many moons ago, an astrologer said to me, oh, your birth chart is full of fire and water. So you're going to find that if you're not careful, you're going to be dealing with lots of steam all the time. And like, you need to find a way to manage that. And then when you said that, I was like, oh, maybe that's my geographical, like, I need to explore the fire and water element.
Have you ever done astrocartography? Because that would tell you the places on the planet that are most conducive. But it's also got, it's Atlantic, so it's also got a lot of wind. And then the land here is, I think is, you know, all land is sacred, but this is a very special part of the world. Clearly I'm biased because it's my home, but you've literally got earth, air, fire, water. So it's very balanced in terms of, you know, doing this kind of work. Optimum conditions, if you remember the original intention. I think I found one of the places where, you know, it's certainly very different to working in, say, I work in Tokyo sometimes. It's chalk and cheese in terms of the integration. You know,
I love that you've explored so many different countries and cultures, Alan. That's impressive, and so many different experiences of your world. And I felt great empathy when you said, you know, you were in the aerospace business and everybody was like, he's lost the plot, he's going mad, the rumors that were abounding. I actually wanted to, on the human level, go, what was that like for you to have people reflecting back that you've lost your mind?
You know, it was actually quite humorous. My boss called me tree hugger. And he was a lovely man, completely asleep, but lovely, you know, very good heart. And I thought he was great. I love most of the people that I work with. You know, I had a Saudi boss who was director of PR. What an amazing man, but completely asleep, like lights are on, but nobody's home. So, and a lot of the people were like that. And I think to be in that business, you kind of have to be.
Right.
You know, it's some of the decisions you need to make. So I was a bit bloody-minded, really. I wanted to go in and have a look at the belly of the beast. And I went in and I got really in the middle of it. And it was pretty horrifying, frankly. There was a lot of disconnection. Not bad people, just people with no connection to themselves, you know. So I found it quite humorous because I knew what I was doing. I knew that I was on my path and I knew it was the right way for me to go. I knew this wasn't congruent with who I was becoming. And yoga was the sort of catalyst in that. And a couple of people got it and they kind of came and were like, good for you, you know, good for you. And actually my boss called me probably about 7 years after I left. I built Breath Guru. It was a very slow burn at the beginning because people were like, breathing, what? You know, so I did a lot of PR. And then the first big one I got was the Sunday Times style magazine, and we got a 3-page spread in that, and mention on the front page. And I was getting like averaging 2 emails a day. I had 2,086 emails in my inbox the next morning. So you can imagine what that did. That was like, part of me was like, yeah, the other part was like, holy shit. So he wrote to me and he said, I still have no idea what you're up to, but I just want to commend you for following your vision, irrespective of all the flack you got. And he sent me a little poem. He used to write poems. And it was just so sweet. And it was beautiful to receive that, you know.
How lovely.
So yeah, so you know, so look at us now, you know, this is now 20 years in. Breathwork is an established medium.
Yeah.
You know, we've got all of the beautiful effects of like the Wim Hofs and Patrick, you know, with Oxygen Advantage. So it's really, there's this body of work there that just simply didn't exist. You know, the pranayama had been there, of course, but all this new stuff that's come in. So it's a very dynamic time. As you know, there's a lot of people now interested in doing it as a career and as their way of contributing. And just to sort of echo your earlier thing, it's very much my way of contributing. It's very much service.
Yeah.
And it's also how I make my living. And that's great. I can do both, you know, in one thing. And it's also my passion, you know. And when I see, you know, I just had a group in, just beautiful people show up. And this one guy, he's just by the pool now, actually, he's my last client, he's going today. And he's just, it's been a revelation for him, because what he's realized is that he's been living his life based on what other people wanted. And he's had that, you know that one, right? I've had that one in spades. And it's turned around for him, and he's very resolute now. It's like, I can't give from an empty cup. I've got to fill my own cup, and then I'm in a position to be of service. And we just had that conversation earlier, and I was like, wow. And it was a 4-night stay, you know, 3 working days. He's got that shit
done. Yeah.
Wow. You know, he was just so ready for that, you know, but like, that's going to change his life. It's literally going to change his life. Yeah.
Alan, so, I want to just interject a moment, because I really, you know, like I say, we could chat. I want to ask you, based on that as a closing piece, if you had one little jewel that you wanted to give to people, it could have been that you just said, you know, about living life on your own terms. But if you had one jewel that you wanted to give people as we close, what would it be?
Prioritize your own needs, wants, and desires. Yeah. Prioritize yourself. It's not only compassionate, but it works so much better. And I've tried it the other way. You know, it just works so much better. It's logical and it's compassionate, and it just works so much better. Prioritize your own needs, wants, and desires, and then go out and be supportive and help and be of service to whoever it is you want to care for and love and contribute to. But that's really the key, I think.
You know? Thank you so much. So prioritize your own needs, wants, and desires, and I second that. We're going to put Alan's links in the show notes below today's episode so that you can go and find him and look him up, and I really recommend that you do. And thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure, Steph. Great hanging out with you, and you know, I have the greatest respect for your work. Like massively, and there's just so much room for women. I think, you know, if you look at like what's out there at the moment, very few women are at the forefront, and I think that's really, I hope it comes into balance. You know, a few of my graduates are out there beginning to rock it, which is great, female graduates, so that's amazing. But I really you know, feel like holding the banner and just being out there and really rocking it, just massive respect coming your way.
Thank you. And I just want to give a little wink there, because I know that you trained with Dana and Ashana, and there's other women out there at the moment, like
they're amazing,
Dennis, and so many great people bringing breath out. And you already mentioned Judith Cobbett, so thank you. And thank you for your lovely comments on my work.
Absolutely, just well deserved. So lots of love to you, and let's have another cup of tea in the chat soon.
Let's do that.
All right. Take care, lovely.
One moment. Bye.